years ago now, I guess in 2016, Mennesotung was summer only camp. The enrollment was fairly low. It was about at 40% capacity. It had been declining for about a decade. It was fully offline. It had a very operational board of directors, many of whom have been doing the same jobs for more than 10 or 20 years. It's kind of a bit of the context. Neri and I called it our superhero job because we did it at night, because we were basically volunteering in the off season and paid for the on season. It's kind of how it was. So year one was wild. We tried not to change everything all at once, trying to honor kind of the traditions and the culture of the camp, see what worked. How can we make this better? And the day, I remember the day would always start with the goal of trying to make it back to my desk to catch up on office work. And I would spend most of the day kind of trying to solve challenges, listen to staff, chat with parents on the way to the office. And the office work became kind of the night owl kind of job that you would do when there's no one there trying to get your attention. Year one for me was all about logistics in many ways, trying to figure out who do I call to pick up the dumpster, where's the line when you call to send a camper home, how do you run a camp during a power outage, where is my role in staff drama, how does this work? A lot of kind of things that I didn't quite anticipate when signing up to be a camp director, and things that I really learned that camp is a village, and how do we run the village. So after the first summer, we took a breath, and there was a list of things that we wanted to change and improve that was far too unmanageable. It was just this massive list. And we loved Mennesotung, and still do. And we wanted to see it succeed. It has huge potential. How do we do this? Because we had new projects and marketing ideas. It either required someone who was working full-time year-round, or a very highly organized team of volunteers. And that was a challenge, because camp could no way afford to have someone work full-time year-round. And our board was not getting younger, and they were not terribly eager to change the way things were run, as they had run for decades, for these fresh directors who thought that they knew better. So this was a challenge, and we decided that we wanted to try to surmount that challenge if we could. And over the next years, we had a strategy of how to try to bring about positive change, and it was in two parts. One was, can we make camp financially sustainable? That can be a goal. And the other one was, how do we build support for change in the board by proving that our ideas make a positive impact? And so that's what we did. Over the next 3 years, we spent most of our time volunteering to propose changes and ideas, and then try to make them happen. So in the beginning, the board would accept like 1 out of every 5 or so ideas proposed. And so we just kept going, propose all the ideas you can. And through that, I really learned about what makes a good idea. How does a proposal really work to make sure that it has a positive change? And usually that meant supported by strong evidence, grants, examples of how it would be positive. It was also helpful to have someone on the board who was like a sponsor for that idea to help advocate, which was great. And I'm just thrilled to say that here we are. I'm going into year 5, and we moved online. We started a spring school program, which in the past 3 years, we were full last year. We had 1,100 kids. It was great. We have one-to-one support. We moved to choice-based programming. Our staff salaries, we were able to increase by 80%. We're moving to canoeing next year. Summer registration's up by 15% every year for the past 4, which is just thrilling. Like, it's just so gratifying. And then the summer kind of became, how can we catch all the balls that we threw in the air during the off season? And the questions shifted to being less about logistics and more about how can I empower the staff to dedicate themselves to a shared vision? What systems can we create that allow for sustainable workloads without creating hierarchy? How do we avoid burnout when overworking? This has been the biggest learning curve. And after summer 2018, Mary and I decided, and this was such a good decision, that we needed to keep learning about how other camps ran. And we actually took a trip out to Sherbrooke Lake, Matt's camp. We spent a week there learning. It was awesome. We volunteered there for a week. And Sherbrooke Lake, as a camp who Matt could tell you has gone through some pretty fabulous transition, and they're a thriving place. And we wanted to see how can we bring some of that goodness back to Mennesotung, and that was great. And we talked a lot with Matt when we were there, and we also kind of reached out to other camps who did camp a different way, because we realized how do we do camp in a way that actually can sustain? If Mary and I were to one day move on from camp, how could it not collapse because it's relying on volunteers who do everything? And so we proposed a big restructuring last year, and the board supported it. It was great. So that's where this structure changed. Now we have an executive director who hires a summer camp director who works from about February part-time until the end of August. And that has been huge for making the work possible. I now find myself in the very fortunate position of being able to work half-time for camp. And that's great. I'm doing it while I'm able to teach, and that's been a fabulous thing. And now this year, the questions have more become, how do you create culture that fosters camper ownership to make Minnesotong their camp? What makes Minnesotong distinct? How do we build on this? Financial sustainability and then partnerships are kind of been dominating my view. So that's a bit of my story. I would love to hear any questions at all about some of that journey, or if others have things they would like clarification. I'm open for questions.
Anybody with questions for Clayton?
Clayton, it's Rick from Camp Lambton Center. Have you, when you talk about sustainability, has there been any sort of, not really silver bullets, but things that have been really helpful for you in moving towards being more sustainable?
So that's a great question. I think grants have been a big piece of something that's been really helpful for me, have been finding grants to run programs. So less capital-based grants and more grants that are based on, for example, we created a pay it forward program where we take campers into local businesses and do community volunteering, and that's like a give back kind of program, and that was helpful to have grants support that kind of thing. Something I'm really excited about for this coming year is a big partnership with Hemophilia Ontario, where they are paying the camp to run a camp for them and their population. And that's, so they're basically adding a full week to our summer, which is a big deal. And they just said, we would like a camp. You're the experts on camp in this area. How do we make a camp for kids with hemophilia? Go. We'll hire you to do that. So that's been really cool for me this past year to think about
that. Any other questions?
I have a question. Clayton, what is, in your financial feasibility, what are your rates at currently and how have they changed over the past 5 years?
Right. So we have gone to tiered pricing as inspired by Joe at Pierce. Our lowest tier right now is at $375, I think is what it is. And it went up $50 this year, which was a big jump. And we kind of stagger the jump. So if they register before January, they pay last year's rates, and then there's an early bird. That's kind of how it's worked. But when I started, the base tier was under 300 for sure. It was like in 280 or something. So that has increased. We've tried to increase enrollment alongside what the tiered price is. We're also right next door to Camp Kintail, which is our big competition, and their rates are like way more than double our rates. So that's been a motivator as well, to try to be a competitor in that.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what your capacity is.
Capacity is just over 100 people sleeping. So we call it full around 70 overnight campers, but we run a day camp at the same time.
So that includes your staff as a whole?
Yes, yeah, it does.
Yeah, I have a real technical question here, Clayton. Have you gotten picked up by a float plane from your camp yet?
No, I have not.
So the reason why I'm asking this, folks, is when they came out to Sherbrooke Lake, Mary, her Clayton's partner's uncle, had a float plane, and they landed the float plane, and they got picked up by a float plane and got taken away from camp. They left camp on a plane. It was pretty awesome.
Oh man, I felt like James Bond in that moment. Oh, it was great.
Absolutely, my friend. Just teasing. Thanks.
Clayton, if I could get the number of that uncle, I'd appreciate it. Thanks for sharing, Clayton. It's great. It's awesome to hear similar challenges and similar situations that a lot of us are facing. And it's really nice to see. I love seeing people reach out to other camps, because I think that's what camping is all about, sharing ideas and resources and good ideas. So thanks.
Thank you.
On to Jill.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Jill Hodgins. I'm from Camp Chemo Key, which is a 21-acre camp just outside of Komoka, which is just west of London. We have a pool. We're landlocked. We have some woods and trails and a creek. And we have beds for about 100 campers. We run summer camp. We also have one-on-one supports for 4 campers or volunteers each week. And then we do the spring outdoor education piece as well. We're not winterized at all, so in the off season I sort of work at home or other locations, but I am full-time year-round staff. And last year I was hired, like almost a year ago today, I guess, and they had tried doing just a year-round camp director the year before my job was created, but they found they needed someone with more managerial experience. And I sort of come from a love of camp as a camper growing up, and then a camp parent. And then I've done other things. So coming into an executive director role where it's running the business and having to deal with HR and logistics and food and kids sort of combines a bunch of my past experiences together. So that's sort of why the board hired me. And the biggest challenge in the past year has been going through the change within the board structure, in that the board has been operational. There's never been any consistency year to year with the staff. And so the board is used to having their hands in everything, and sort of for them being able to let go and trust me to do things so that they don't have to worry about it has been a big shift for them. And that means dealing with personalities and egos and learning a lot from my perspective, to the point where the board members do know that I will handle what needs to be done so far. So that's sort of been the biggest challenge in the first year, is sort of just making that transition with the board. And I have to admit, they're not there yet. They still like to be very hands-on, but they're learning that I can make decisions and I can sign checks. They don't need a board member to do that, and that sort of thing. But the first year I focused on just more observing and questioning and learning about the camp and its culture and the way it's done things in the past. And from there, it came to be getting through a first season and then reflecting the past few months on what needs to change, what can be changed easily, what needs to be a gradual change. Even something as simple as the food needs work, and wanting to totally restructure the food service program, but knowing that we have to do it bit by bit because the staff have their routines that are based on how we go into the dining hall and how we eat. So right now, bringing on change slowly and deciding what needs to be immediate and what can wait is a big thing. We're moving towards camper choice programming this year, which is a really good thing, because behavioral issues tend to be, they were a big problem last year, camper behavior, and so that's one of the things we're trying to do to help that. And then we've sort of restructured our the organization. So everything, all the policies and procedures and job descriptions and everything was written without an executive director. And so defining my role last year was part of the process, and going through into my second year, I'll be able to say, this is my role. I'm not the camp director. I have a summer camp director, but I'm here to do these things for you, and making sure that those roles are written in the policies and written in the job descriptions and things like that is a big thing. And so it's just those sorts of things, consistency, and making it so the summer camp director knows that they have responsibility. And then we took sort of, we flattened out the next level of leadership. As opposed to having 2 assistant directors, we've just made 5 coordinators for different programs. And I'm excited about what it'll do. I think it'll engage the leadership team more together and also with the campers and the other staff. So it's just identifying areas of weakness and trying to try something new and make that change is what part of that is. Our board has also been doing a 3-year capital campaign. We've been around for 60 years and the buildings have been around for 60 years. So they've raised in the past 2 years over $1 million to go into infrastructure and program. And then we're also setting up an endowment fund to help sustain the camp long term. So that's one of the reasons why they created my job too, is looking towards long-term sustainability financially and managing the camp with a volunteer board, just giving the direction. So that's been an exciting time. We're planning renovate. We've got our health hut gutted and we're trying to finalize the plans so we can get the work done on that. And we're going to be getting a couple other buildings, and we've built a whole new big washroom and utility building as well that opened last year. So not only is it a time of change for the program and the summer camp, but also for the buildings and a lot of construction and that sort of thing going on. So it's an exciting time to be with the camp that has sort of just been coasting along with no clear direction. Now the board's investing in the camp and I'm here to help create the continuity year to year, which it needs. So that's kind of where I'm at. When I started out, and I think that definitely Joe can speak to this, is last year when I started, I didn't know what I didn't know. and certainly networking and working with Joe and connecting with Kathy and with Rick, those were people that I knew I could really count on to help me through the first year. And I think that as a group, we've learned more and more that the more we do share, the more we can learn from each other. And so that's really helped my knowledge base, or when I've had a problem, being able to turn to people that are on this call for advice has been really great in the past year. So I guess that's about it. I ramble. Any questions?
My first question would be, what is the biggest thing you wish you'd known that you know now, but you didn't know then?
That's a tough one. I wish I'd known when I took the job how possessive the board members were of the camp. I wish, like, coming from working for another nonprofit where the board was really just a advisory board and you never saw them, you never heard from them, nothing like that, and coming into this situation where like the board's all over the place. I wish I had realized that, because I wasn't expecting to have to manage the change on the board side as much as I did.
Jill, you talked about some camper behavior issues. I'm wondering what was the most prevalent. What were the main things you were seeing?
It depends on the week, but I think what a lot of it goes down to is campers being prepared to be at camp and also having control over their choices. So some campers were plainly just sent to camp and not told until the day before, or parents telling their campers, if you don't like it, you can come home, or those sorts of things. It's partly, I would have to say, partly on the parents not preparing their camper properly to come, and then it's also known, like through psychology, that the more control campers have, or people have over their choices, and that they feel that they have power, the happier they are. And I think the camper-based programming is good. Like, we were doing last year 5 program sessions a day of 45 minutes each, but the campers had no choice as to what they would do. And they were rushed from place to place. I felt not given enough time to really settle into where they were at. And they had no choice about where they were going. So it was just, they're like, oh, I'm just starting to relax, and off I go to do something else that I don't even know if I want to do it. So I think that's something that'll help with the issues. And I think every kid likes to feel like they have control and choice. So.
That's an interesting note on campers coming, maybe not through their own choice in the first place. And we saw a fair amount of that too. And when your ultimate disciplinary action is to send them home, and that's exactly what they want to do, then that doesn't leave you with much to work with there.
No, and it just invites poor behavior, especially if the parents are saying, you know, we'll come and get you if you misbehave. And then they're like, oh, I want to go home. I'm going to run down the lane. Like, our lane's long, but we did have people come, you know, we had the campers that fled, and we were chasing them down the highway. And it's just because they wanted to go home. And they were told they could if they did that sort of thing.
You are not alone.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for Jill?
How are you going to overcome that this year?
Which, the campers running?
Or the camper parent issue?
Well, we just finished, or I just finished redesigning our website, and one of the things is in frequently asked questions, I did speak about how to prepare your camper for camp, and also don't tell them they can come home if they misbehave. We want to keep your kid at camp, and we want to engage them, so we don't want them to know that that's an option necessarily. I think I phrased it better. But I also, in our pre-camp emails and things, like we haven't done an camper open house for a few years, and so we are doing one this year, where in June we will invite all our camp families to come and show their camper the camp for a couple hours and have dinner and hot dog and a tour, so that those first-time campers can come and see what they're getting into, and then just communicating with the parents, saying, have you show your camper this picture, show your camper this, like doing just more lead up with the parents, so that hopefully they'll engage the camper a little bit more. That's sort of the strategy I'm going for this year.
Jill, I have a question. You mentioned that you have a big capital campaign that's raised over $1 million. Is there a group of people that are your biggest supporters, and why?
Our biggest supporters are the United Churches in the community, really. There's United Church Council, Middlesex Presbytery. A couple of our larger donors we were previous board members and camp directors and staff. We have one really loyal fellow, Cam Brown. He's, I don't know, must be 90 years old, and he gave a generous donation to the camp. But he's also very connected to Strathroy United Church, and they're one of our big supporters as well. So really it is within the United Church community where I would say a lot of our donations to the capital campaign has come from, which has been great.
Cool, thanks.
And just so everyone knows, in all of my research into fundraising, the majority of capital funds are going to come from individuals or churches, not from corporate and not from grants.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
I'm the last person. I'm the third person who is going to speak. Just with my experience coming in, and I think we're a little over time with where we want to be, so I'll keep it quick. But just some context for a lot of this. There's a lot of echoing from Clayton and Jill as well, which is not surprising. A little context: Big Canoe, Camp Big Canoe's in just outside of Bracebridge. We're on about 240 acres of land. We have our sort of the crown jewel is our lake. It's just there's no other cottages on it, just our own little slice of heaven there. Just under 100 campers, mostly summer programming, looking to get more into spring and fall programs, but like Kimo Key, we're not winterized, so winter's still a few seasons away. The camp started in 1931 on Lake Simcoe, and then moved up in 1968 to where we are now. When I was a camper and a staff member at Big Canoe growing up, so it was a unique experience for me to come back to a place. I'd sat on the board after I finished as a staff member, but had a separation of around 12 or 13 years before I came back. So it was really interesting for me to come back to a place that I felt was home, felt very familiar at, but was a stranger coming into it, because the culture continued while I wasn't there. So it was really interesting to see all the same characters, the same type of people, the same antics going on, but nobody knew me. So I had another unique part of coming back to Camp Big Canoe was the director that I worked with for 6 years at Big Canoe was the outgoing director. So he'd been there for 20 years and was a big mentor to me and to a lot of people around the table. Bill Stevens, and we had a transition period of 6 months. So it was really wonderfully set up where we were working together for 6 months from November to the beginning of May. And so he sort of guided me through in real time all of those things that were happening. And then once the summer really kicked into high gear, I was flying on my own, but he's always still just a phone call away, unless he's on the lawnmower at Pierce Williams. My first summers, I'm going into my third summer. My first 2 summers have really been one of my big focuses is to earn the trust and respect of the staff. That we're blessed there with a really positive camp culture and a lot of staff who have come up being campers, whose parents were campers and staff. There's a lot of tradition and history coming into it. So to be able to earn that respect and trust of the staff, campers, parents, board that were there was a big central focus in my first couple summers. Also just sort of watching how the machine was running, and it was running well, especially in my first couple summers, just seeing what was going well, jumping in with things that were obviously falling off the rail a bit, but for the most part, just observing and experiencing what was happening. And now going into my third summer, and to an extent in my second summer, really pushing the areas that I think we can improve our strengths on, but really keeping an eye to the things that are working well, and there are a lot of things that are working well. Some of the things that have been challenges, again, we're really blessed with that positive culture, but because there's so much ownership, any kind of change is a big deal. So there's a fair amount of PR to do with any kind of change that I do want to initiate. Bill once told me that each year somewhere between 5 and 6% of the staff just aren't going to like me, and that was something tough to get over. When I was a staff member there, it was easy to get people to like me, but as soon as you're in the central role and making the tough decisions, it was tough at the beginning to get used to people not agreeing with that and not necessarily following. That being said, something that pleasantly surprised me was that my staff listened, and it was really interesting. If I had my sort of set and written goals at the beginning of staff training, things that I really wanted them to focus on, one of those this past year was program creativity. And if I pounded that home in staff training, then they really listened, and they took that on as their own idea and really took a lot of pride in the creative programming that we were able to deliver. Another one of the challenges for me is like I think a lot of you, it can be a lonely job. I'm the only full-time year-round employee, so it's for 7 or 8 months it's me. I've learned to surround myself with people that can keep me inspired, keep helping me answer the questions that I have. I'm fortunate to have a board that's invested and listens to my ideas, which is nice. But it's really important to surround yourself with camp people and people who think the same way. Going forward, some of our challenges, we're really fortunate to have a kitchen head chef who's been there for going into his 15th year this year. And I am not looking forward to the summer that he doesn't come back. That will be a challenge. And we're seeing some changes with our board. Nothing at all toxic or people retiring earlier than they had thought, but people moving on at the right time, and new people coming in with new ideas. So that's a balance of making sure to harness those new ideas and making people feel welcome, and keeping the positive culture that we've had on the board as well. I think that sort of is an overall view of my experience coming into Big Canoe. Any questions?
Not necessarily any question, but definitely a comment. I'm glad you raised the idea that, you know, there are some people who work in camp and who are by ourselves. It is a very lonely job, especially in the November to you know, basically end of April time frame. So just naming that is important. Working from, like, if I call Joe or whatever, he's like, "What coffee shop are you working at today?" Because, or, you know, or if it's, you know, yeah, like, and so it's just kind of that idea that how do we support one another who are not only through this, but maybe there's something else that we can do, which is kind of a little topic that we'll start for later. But I appreciate you saying that, Steve, because it's so true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is. I think it's really important to be surrounding ourselves and making sure that everybody at this table understands that the lines are always open and emails always open, and yeah, it's. I'm fortunate also to live at a different camp. My wife teaches at a private school that's based at Camp Towingo, so I'm fortunately surrounded by. If I'm walking outside, surrounded by other people, but it can be. It's important to have those connections to people, and we should all be buying shares in Tim Hortons, I suppose, because I spend a lot of time in coffee shops too. Moving on, if nobody else has comments or questions about, I really appreciate Jill and Clayton sharing your experiences. It's nice to hear, and with such positive forecasts as well. I think for all three of us. One of I sent out some questions. The questions to experienced directors was what were three things that you wish you had known coming into your job, and then to first time directors or younger directors, what are the three biggest things you wish you'd known? Jill and Clayton both answered a few of those things. I'm wondering if anybody else had anything to share that came to their mind as one of the biggest concerns or the biggest thing that you wish you'd known.
Looking back many years, I think the biggest thing I wish I'd known is how dysfunctional the summer staff had become, and what led to that. And so had I known those things, it would have been easier to come in with the right mindset. But oftentimes, as a camp director, you come in because a change is needed, or the board has determined a change is needed. But to know, even now, I still don't know some of that history of what caused the dysfunction at that time. and led to a wide variety of issues with summer staff, with full-time staff departing, quitting after a board meeting, like just the weirdest stuff.
Joe, was that in the 1980s?
No, I'm not that old, but
Yes, you
so
are.
this would be in the late. A lot of these things happened in the late 90s and early 2000s. So part of it was a transition from long term, right? Like from directors who'd been here for 10 years to a new director, and then to that person leaving, but the board not having a good vision of where they wanted to go. And they did pause in that moment and decided to make some big changes, which is the reason I've often said to anybody, I wouldn't be here if the board hadn't determined that they needed an executive director versus just a coordinator.
I think that's really important, Joe. The something that Jill mentioned is her background in the managing side of things, and that's something that I don't have a lot of experience with. A lot of experience with in education and in camping, and so a lot of my focus in my first couple of years has been to create or nurture that positive camp culture, because I think that carries a lot of the rest of it. Now my challenge is coming back and really focusing on the managerial side, as long as everything else, as long as the staff culture and the culture around camp is maintained at a high level of positivity, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts, biggest concerns coming in, or things that you wish you'd known from experienced
I
directors?
just have a quick one. I wish I had known that everyone feels like they're faking it at some point in their first few years. Like, people are going to find out I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Everybody feels that way at the start.
Dude, I'm 15 years in, and still.
I was going to say, I still feel that.
Yeah.
In my almost old job, there's days where I'm like, oh, crap, they're going to know I don't know what I'm doing.
Imposter syndrome.
But it's also important to know that those things you don't know, right? Like, I just think that's so important. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned in the last 4 years is just, hey man, like, I'm not X. I don't know how to do this. But letting on to the staff to know that you don't know that is maybe not. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. But anyways, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
For me, I think the number one thing that I've been working on is just understanding that everything is culture. Every single thing that we do is the culture of the camp. And I got rid of pretty much the whole leadership team of the camp from last year, moving into this year, because the culture that they were pushing wasn't really a culture that was really about what kids were looking for. It was more a culture about, it was just, it become very competitive, I guess. Like, everyone was really trying to like be the best and climb the ladder and all of these sorts of things, instead of just focusing on creating a sense of belonging for kids. So I think the most wonderful thing about camp is that it's only 2 months long, and you don't have to hire everyone back, and you can just kind of wait it out sometimes, and then start the new year with a new role, and a new culture and a new bunch of staff, and have conversations with them about what the expectations are and what we're trying to create at the camp. So this year we're just really focusing on creating a sense of belonging for kids. So everyone I talk to, that's what it's about. And I always remember my old mentor at Camp White Pine, Joe Cronick, was always talking about how he didn't really care if like the windsurfing instructor knew how to windsurf as long as the guy was nice. And I always thought, well, that's really silly, but now I really get it, because it really doesn't really matter if the guy knows how to windsurf, but as long as he's nice. That I think couldn't be truer than true, and shifting to that mindset, as I think it will make some great changes for us this year.
Yeah, to speak from my business side of things, like the research shows that culture is the one thing in any organization that will make or break it. So you can bring in people, but if they don't buy into what your culture is, and if you don't create a strong culture, you're not going to be successful or have a successful team. And so that sometimes you have to clean house to make that happen, and you're just repeating the same messages. But definitely, like, understanding the culture and hearing the culture, it's going to also give you repeat customers. So it's going to keep your campers coming back. It's going to keep those staff people coming back and wanting to develop and grow with the camp because they bought into it. So culture is one of the most important things that we need.
I would also add too, I completely agree. And if anybody, one of the things that I think is really important for all of us is to inspire one another and give ideas. I completely 110% agree. We did the same thing. We were we were on the brink of saying, you know what, this isn't maybe our thing that we should be doing, camp. And executive director, long story short, 2017 when I came on, we had just under 300 kids. At the end of July, the culture has completely shifted, and I'm 11 days in, and we have I'm just watching now 95 spots left. Like there are things that have shifted the mindset for parents, and the number one thing that changed for me was sending my daughter to camp for the first time when I was on the board. And it scared the bejesus out of me, because I thought to myself, if I'm a board member and I'm having bad dreams about my daughter, running down to the lake and then nobody being there, then so did the other parents. And so that's going to change. And that was the number one thing that I did. And from that moment forward, I go back to how I felt at that time.
Something that I kind of wish I knew was that if you achieve your goal of creating the safe space and the belonging, and people feel really comfortable, that there are side effects to that. And we have a lot of campers disclosing a lot of mental health stuff and abuse at home, and be prepared to deal with that has been a learning curve as well. That if you have that safe space, you're going to get people sharing really personal things, and how do you make sure that that is done in a safe way too.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for sharing. That's a lot of great insight. I had asked for some other topics, because I think it's important to get some feedback on what people were interested in chatting about. But we are also getting closer to the end of our meeting. I want to hand it over to Joe and Matt, and then perhaps a couple of the topics that people wanted to talk about were the interview process and recruitment, where to find staff in particular, and then performance evaluations for staff as well. I'm wondering if we might be able to set that up to discuss online over the next month too, because especially those recruiting questions are pertinent information now. But I'll hand it over to Joe and Matt for now.
Thank you, Steve. I don't think we should gloss over the topics thing, because if you have been looking at the website, you'll see that we don't have any topic planned for the February meeting. So that's February the 10th, which is a Monday. And I like the idea of the of evaluation and staff recruitment. And I think if that conversation can start online over the course of this month, that would be awesome. I'm not sure where we start that conversation. That is one of our big challenges, is that we don't have a central hub to put our ideas out there. So that is part of our plan going forward, is how do we give ourselves a meeting space that is for United Church Camp people, that we can have somewhat digital communication that's not on Facebook, and that's not on, because some people don't use Facebook, some people don't, Twitter's not going to do it for us. And I'm not sure what the solution is. We're looking at creating, many people here on the Camp Mavericks. Many people have done some Camp Maverick stuff, and so we have a space in a private room there. And we're just in negotiation with Camp Hacker to see what the pricing would be to buy a space for all of us to be in the Camp Mavericks group, which would mean a bit of a learning curve to learn it, but a safe space where we can all chat about it. So that being said, I'm going to let Matt do some talking.
Great. Thanks, Joe. So one of the things we talked about before Christmas was this idea that, yes, this what we do every second Monday of every month, except for in the summer, is important to continue, but also recognizing that there are people in this space right now, but also people who aren't able to be here that do work in camp in a year-round capacity, whether it's a part-time executive director, camp director role, part-time or full-time, year-round. And so what we want to be able to do is open up another another meeting, gathering, support session, whatever we want to call it, just to get together for half an hour, 45 to an hour, on topics that people would like to talk about. So for those of us who are in that world, also recognizing that idea that sometimes it is lonely, having your own, being by yourself for 8 months of the year, and really being intentional to make sure that we have that space. So for those of us in that world, just be aware, and that we'll be in touch. Is that something that those folks who are in that in those jobs, is that something that you'd be interested in? I'm just kind of looking for kind of head nods or thumbs up or kind of sideways if people are agree with that. Yeah. Okay, great. All right, that's great. Thank you.
Did you have anything else, Matt, to go over?
No, I don't think so. That was it.
Okay. So we need a host for the February meeting, which will be Monday, February the 10th. So someone to do like what Steve does. Matt or I will reach out prior to it to make sure that you have, that you're ready to sort of host, but it beats listening to me and Matt talk. So are there any volunteers out of this group of 16 people? And I have recorded minutes for this meeting, not just recorded the meeting, but I've also taken some digital meeting minutes that I'll put up on the website as well. Can I get someone to host the February 10th meeting? Or be told to host the February 10th meeting? I was pretending I was frozen there to see who would step up. I'll be on a plane to San Diego, so it's not me.
I think we just sit here until somebody does it.
Oh, okay, great.
I will do it.
Or until everybody leaves.
Brendan said he will do it. He will
Is that
host.
you, Dan? Oh, Brendan. Great.
Brendan said it first, I think. So I'll put that in the list.
Brendan. And then Dan in March.
As long as the March meeting is
Oh yeah.
during March. No, the March meeting, if we stick with the second, your Matt, I keep muting you because your volume is really bad for all of us. You have a bunch of stuff going on in the background, mainly kids, I would think. The March meeting, the second Monday is the 9th of March, and so that is before March break. But I think on the website we have Monday, March 16th, but I can switch that to the 9th. And Dan, are you okay to host on the 9th of March? He is good to host, so I'll put that in the minutes. So next month we will do interview, recruitment, and evaluation. Do you think that's too much, or do it all in one? Do it all in one kick.
Do it all.
Great. If we dedicate 10 minutes towards each, then we should have plenty of time to run over as well. So interview, recruitment, where to find staff, and then evaluations for staff as we go forward. On a final note, as we try to wrap up before 8:30, we need to ask if, so we talked on the last call about a gathering every year with the funds, with part of those funds, which we had written up. And the question would be, do we want to gather as just ourselves? So Pierce Williams has set aside a weekend in November to host Think Camp and the Outdoor Ministries Institute together. So it wouldn't be just ourselves. We'd have some other camp people with us, and that would be cool. Or do we like the idea of instead piggybacking on another association's conference? So Matt and myself have been going to the Presbyterian Church Camp and Conference Association every year. This year it's in Washington State, so near you'd fly into Portland, Oregon. And so I can't give you any details on cost and whatnot for that because I don't have them. But for the idea would be that they already have a conference, they already have lots of sessions. It's much more like the Great Gathering that happened, but many fewer people. So it's about 100 to 150 people at a Presbyterian church conference. And they have it set up the same way. It's during the week and it's not on a weekend. And so those are some thoughts that I'm not sure that anybody has any specific feedback now. Or you can ask questions. I would appreciate either of those things.
Joe, did you say when it was?
Yeah, it is in November as well. And it is, the Presbyterian Conference this year is November 6th. Google's trying to catch up to my thinking. Okay. I believe it's November 8th. It would start essentially the 8th and then go home on the 12th. So it is the week before Canadian Thanksgiving. Is that correct? When is Canadian Thanksgiving? We're always no, Thanksgiving's in October. Stop. So November, I just turned so American there for a second. So I believe if you go to pCCCA.net, pCCCA.net.
Is it the one November 1st to 6th in Oregon?
Is that what it is? Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Great. So that is an option. And what I would recommend it's a different option than, I know the people in Ontario, who there's lots on this call from Ontario, have the Ontario Camps Association conference that you can go to. The pricing on the OCA conference is a bit ridiculous, always has been. In the knowledge you may have before anyone else is that's going to shift in 2021, where you'll be able to bring more staff for based on how many full registrations you buy for the OCA conference. And they're going to move it away from a hotel and more into a conference center where you book your hotel separately, but close by. But the PCCCA conferences, I I'm great. We also, as Pierce Williams, we recently joined the PCCCA in something called the Campfire Coalition. So we are a member, Pierce Williams is a member of the Campfire Coalition, which the big vision is that all outdoor ministries should be together and supporting each other, not just denomination by denomination. So we have much to learn from many, many people. Let's sit. We're not making any decisions. Our office is holding the November. So what did you say it is, Steve? You said it's November
1 to 6.
1 to 6, and then we have set aside the 26th. So if we do it at Pierce Williams, it would be a Thursday night through a Sunday afternoon. So that would be the 26th of November to the 29th. My wife's birthday's in there, so she would totally appreciate a 1 to 6 instead, so I could spend her birthday. But she doesn't spend time with me anyway, so you guys are my counseling group. Yeah.
I'd like to throw out there that BC also has a camping association. If you guys are looking to travel all the way to the West Coast, that BC has it. It's always at the end of January, beginning of February. So the timings, we'd be looking at 2021.
Yeah.
But I'd like to throw that out there. And it's at Stillwood Camp Retreat Center this year. So.
And the BCCA still partners with CCI International, like Christian Camping International. Is that correct, Robin? Do you know that?
The BC Camping Association, I'm not sure.
The last time I spoke to Harry Stewart, I keynoted the BC conference about 10 years ago. So it's a weird one because you have BCCA people and then you have Christian Camping International, which is fine. We need to make friends with everybody. So let's think about this. We don't need an answer tonight, but by the end of February, we should really make a decision to sort of determine what's going to go on. The big thing would be, I'll do an email up to explain the difference between those two things, because our conference internally with us here at Pierce Williams, because we know we can host it, would be much more self-guided versus lots of different speakers and different sessions. So we would go from there. I think that's it for right now. Matt, you're good? You're good. Anybody have any questions before we leave for the night? I'm looking around.
I don't have a question. I just want to say I really appreciated this a lot. And I'm just so sad that other directors, even if they're seasoned directors, wouldn't have been on this to hear sort of the stories and the similarities and the passion. I wish this sort of stuff could be heard by so many more, to hear it.
So, Kathy, I'm really glad you said that because I was thinking about this and mentioning it or not. But the next time you guys get one of those annoying emails from Joe and I, can you just invite one person from another camp and say, hey, maybe this is going to your junk mail, or maybe there's a board member like this idea, or maybe it's got the email address that we have for that camp is not the right one. Can you invite one person from a camp in your area and say, hey, can you find somebody to please come to this for February? Can everybody make that commitment? Thumbs up? Because I think that's really important. Thanks.
Yeah. And I don't know how, I just know that in my capacity, and I'm actually going to be meeting with Jordan and Amy and Bev Og to talk about, I don't even know what to say it's about, but I know that regions, and I know I'm for region 7, 8, 9, so I'm not going to speak for the other regions across the country for sure, but there is a real sense of saying we have to get all the camps together to talk, especially in regions, to talk about the future of the camping ministry in the United Church of Canada and have a really solid vision and a capacity and statements about how to make that happen and what you know, what is going to be the relationship with the ongoing church? And so stay tuned. I don't know how we're going to, I've been actually given money to make something happen in our regions, like thousands of dollars to bring you together. It's going to be a big job.
Yeah, I think that this getting together, I think, and we said it last month, that there are people having conversations about us without us.
Absolutely.
That's a good phrase. And so if we don't get together and start to have the tough conversations or give a plan as to how we're moving forward, I think that somebody might make decisions that we do not agree with.
That's why I wonder if the event in November might be better for just the United Church camps. That's just as I'm thinking about it.
Thanks, Kathy. That makes me think, that was the date that was thrown around to me to say maybe November's when you need to get, and so I'm speaking of 11 camps in the 3 regions that I have some support for or to be supporting. Yeah. And it was, even if it was suggested that November would be the time to see if we could do something together. And other regions are interested in, I know Jeffrey Dale, so that's your area, Steve and Brendan, that he's saying, yeah, I'm being told we've got to get folks together to talk about the future.
Yeah, and maybe that's what will determine it in the end, because we need to have that conversation sooner rather than later.
I think the end of November is a little late, but what can you do? As Peace Williams not have anything earlier in the month?
I will recheck with Shannon, but she is my office manager and booking agent, and we that November date was the first free weekend where we wouldn't be kicking another rental out to get us. So she's held it for us, but I'll recheck with her, because I know in the past we used to host connections in the end of September, if I was not mistaken.
Or even in early October we did it, right?
Yeah, but you need to be careful of
Thanksgiving,
Canadian Thanksgiving. So yeah, I'll recheck with Shannon, but and it depends on size as well. I would hope that our size would go to 100 people, and this always goes to this idea that when you host, having blower bunks for everybody is really beneficial. And we have, with all camp, we have 100 bottom bunks. So we can sleep 200 people. We have 100 bottom bunks, right? So, so just things. I agree. So we'll keep this going. Put it on the list for February, and I will not see you in February because I will be on a plane to go talk at the ACA National about difficult conversations. So I want to thank you all for coming, and have a great night. And we'll be in touch with things over email over the course of this month. Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.